Welcome to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
It has become a tradition on this program each year to question the keynote speaker at the North Idaho Dr. Martin Luther King Day ceremony. Sometimes we tape this and then air it a little bit later. On January the 15th of this year, 1990, the keynote speaker was Jeannie Givens from Coeur d'Alene. She has a very long and distinguished career and activity in public policy, and I will only today share a few of those accomplishments with you. She's probably best known as a former member of the Idaho State House of Representatives. She served 2 terms, or 4 years, from the 5 northern counties, most northern counties of Idaho. Recently, she received from the Northwest Coalition Against Malicious Harassment, which is a 5-state human rights group, their prestigious Baird Rustin Civil Rights Award at their convention in October in Portland, Oregon. Another interesting note about our guest is that the Idaho State Journal, which is a newspaper in Pocatello, Idaho, selected Jeannie Givens as one of the 10 most influential Idahoans during the decade of the 1980s. Our guest also serves on the Idaho Centennial Commission. As many of you know, this is the 100th year and our celebration in Idaho, and she chairs the Native American subcommittee of that Centennial Commission. As always, Jeannie, it's a pleasure to have you with us, and we look forward to the interview, and we commend you for the address that you gave at Martin Luther King Day.
Thank you, Tony and Janelle. It was a very special experience to be the keynote speaker for Martin Luther King Day.
Also, I'm very happy, as always, to have one of our regular panel members, Janelle Burke, who is an attorney in Idaho, and I shall ask Janelle to commence the questioning.
Jeannie, welcome to the program today. As we've mentioned, you were the keynote speaker for Dr. Martin Luther King Day. Can you tell us, what was your message? What was your theme for that particular address?
The theme that I wanted to bring to light to the Coeur d'Alene audience in that beautiful hall full of hundreds and hundreds of people and hundreds of young children is that as we pursue Martin Luther King's dream, Dr. King's dream, that there is some unfinished business that needs to be addressed and needs to be taken care of. I think with that dream that is alive in many people, that is the pursuit of economic justice, economic equality, those kinds of things where people need some extra help. They need health care insurance. We have over 500,000 children who are homeless. Now that is not economic justice. And while the economy in some areas is rebounding, we do have some unfinished business. And the whole speech generally was kept on the tone of the future of young children.
Now, that brings me to another point. Why do we have Martin Luther King Day? And should we have that as a holiday in Idaho?
That's a very good question. Martin Luther King Day in North Idaho has become a long-standing tradition, with the community becoming very involved and visibly involved and participating in a number of activities. So this is something that we have not needed a state holiday to conduct Martin Luther King activities. Our community takes that initiative itself. As far as a state holiday, I think it would be very appropriate to honor Dr. King in Idaho on January 15th and have that become a state holiday. Some people are arguing that it might be too expensive. Well, I think that it's okay. In light of the 3 states that are left that have not adopted a Martin Luther King holiday, we need to join the rest of the country. Those 3 states are Idaho, Montana, and New Hampshire. It's good for many reasons because we reflect on the human rights work of a great man, but it's also good because we want to make sure that Idaho doesn't take a bum rap for its image with the Aryan nations and the neo-Nazis. So I think it's good public policy, and it's also good public relations.
And what kind of a response did you get from the school children when you talked with them?
Oh, they are very enthusiastic, and I think that they are heartened that people are looking out for that economic justice and the freedom that is so much of a component of Dr. King's dream. So we have a lot of unfinished business to do, and I know that a lot of young children had some new ideas to think about.
Jeannie, I know that You just mentioned the fact that only 3 states are left that are not officially acted for a state holiday, and that sends a message across the country that is in error. I mean, it's a misconception. The first idea that people may get is that since we don't have state holiday, that we've done nothing in the form of legislation for human rights. I too, like you, understand the need for the state holiday, and until we do that, that message will continue to go through the media every year that only 3 states are left. However, let's get on to some other legislation that you have had a lot to do with when you were a member of the legislature, along with some other legislators, because Idaho has a lot to be proud about, as do some other Northwest states, concerning what we call anti-hate crime legislation. Could you inform our viewers, and I think that's a good way to celebrate the holiday, Martin Luther King, by pointing out that there is legislation that protects people in a society from being victims. So tell us about the Idaho package.
The Idaho package is a package that will be a shining example to the rest of the country as far as states that have taken the initiative to address hate-related activity. Within that component, we have an Anti-Terrorism Act that was adopted. We also have on the books now a very important piece of state legislation. We are leading the way in the federal government in this area. It is to monitor hate-related activity and crimes and compile that in an easy-to-understand format for law enforcement to keep track of hate activity within the state. And we need to know, I think citizens have the right to know as to whether or not there is a problem in the state of Idaho. And if there is a problem, their communities can act. They can form task forces, support groups, and really address the problem. But what we've needed is we've needed those hard numbers. And now we do have that. It passed last year with a lot of hard work, and we have that in place now, and we will begin seeing the results of the hate crimes reporting bill. Very important component of the package. Another important piece of legislation that has passed has been increasing the civil penalties for malicious harassment, and that also sends a very strong message that hate-related activity is not going to be tolerated in this state. So the legislature's been on board and supportive. The governor has been supportive, and I'm very happy to see that our governor, in his State of the State message, has said he wants to see this day, Martin Luther King's birthday, become a state holiday. So that holiday is the cherry on the dessert that we're waiting for.
I just had a footnote here. There's a wonderful organization called the Southern Poverty Law Center in Alabama. They recently did a very thorough research project in which they looked at all 50 states and the package that you're addressing. And I think they have 8 categories of laws that you could pass, and some of those are within the same realm, like criminal penalties or civil penalties for malicious harassment. And as I received a copy of that, as I noted across the chart, there were more columns checked for the state of Idaho than any other state. And I know you were one of the instrumental individuals in having that to happen in the 1980s in the legislature. I think that's something for Idaho to be proud of, that we have covered so much of that area to protect citizens.
Absolutely. Idaho has nothing really to be ashamed, but we're talking about the difference of actuality and perception. As Martin Luther King's birthday came into celebration this year, with pre-ceremonies on a Sunday and actual ceremonies on a Monday, like many other Americans, I saw on national television a map that showed the 3 states in the nation that had not yet adopted Martin Luther King as an official state holiday, and Idaho was there. And I think we need to take care of that swiftly and do it right away.
Janelle Burke.
During your introduction, Tony mentioned that you were on the Centennial Commission. This is a very exciting year. Can you tell us what particular subcommittee you're on and some of the activities that you have planned?
I've been working on Idaho's centennial celebration for about 5 years now, and we have a celebration that's going to involve 1 million people in the state. So every citizen of the state of Idaho is going to have a good opportunity to get involved in local activities as well as big activities. Our Native American Committee's been very busy for 2 years. We have 2 major projects that we are working on, and they're big projects. The first one is a 4th grade Indian history book that will be made available to every 4th grade fourth grader in the state of Idaho. We wanted to emphasize and make it easy for fourth graders to have access to this information as well as their teachers. We are now compiling that. That should be ready for publication in the spring. There's so much enthusiasm about this project. It's written on the fourth grade level, so it's very simple, it's very straightforward, written by Indians about Indians in the state.
Is it fact or fiction or a little of both? I mean, does it include some stories that have been handed down over the years? Does it include that kind of thing, or is it mainly a factual story? There are some wonderful, wonderful stories.
You will
for young people.
You will see Indian legends, and they will be stated in a very simple language. You'll see coloring activities, puzzles, and you'll also see historical perspective laid out in a very, very simple way. I think that this fourth grade Indian reading project is going to be enjoyed by one and all ages, I'm sure. The other project that is so exciting is that the 5 tribes of Idaho will be putting on a large 6-day exposition in Boise, January 9th through the 15th. And every night a different tribe will participate. They will put on a war dance, they'll put on legends, special programs that every tribe has. The Coeur d'Alene tribe of Idaho is going to present the dramatic presentation of the coming of the black robes, as well as a war dance and some special things that we're reserving for the public. So I think it's just going to be a fabulous week, and everyone will, I hope the participants will walk away with a new understanding about Idaho's Indians.
Jeannie, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, as they became more and more involved in the civil rights movement, took a trip to India. They went on a mission to study what Gandhi had said about nonviolence and working for civil rights, and they said they learned a lot from that. I know that you've recently been on a trip. I know that you didn't plan it, that you didn't have foresight a year ago to know that this was going to happen, but the important point is that you and your spouse were in Germany, in Berlin recently, and you were there when the action was taking place and the wall was coming down. I would like for you to tell us about that trip and what it meant to you, and in a minute I know we're going to show some photographs of your trip, and please tell us what that experience meant to you.
Tony, you're right. We didn't plan it this way, that we would be in Berlin as the Berlin Wall was coming down. Both Ray and I had been saving and planning for a trip to Nuremberg, West Germany, to visit my sister and her husband, who is in the army there. Well, we were all very thrilled and excited about our trip, and we were leaving on the 22nd of November, and boom, on November 9th, the Berlin Wall came down. The East German government had opened up that area for people to travel back and forth freely. So as we watched the news night after night, we were so excited to be able to be in Germany at that time. We had planned to go to Austria and to see the beautiful mountains, but we changed our plans immediately and routed ourselves up to Berlin with my sister, her husband, and our nieces. So we had a fabulous trip.
Would you take us through some of the photographs that we're going to show on the screen?
Tony, the first photograph I would like to show you is a picture of myself, and I'm in front of Brandenburg Gate, and below Brandenburg Gate is the wall, the Berlin Wall. I am on the west side. It's a very, very cold day that day. However, there are hundreds of people walking through the pathway along the Berlin Wall. And the next picture that I would like to show you is of my young niece. She is 4 years old, and this was her first trip to Berlin, and she was very taken by all the activity around her, and we reminded her that something very historical and important was happening, so she was having so much fun having her picture taken.
She won't forget that experience.
Nor will her aunt. So anyway, the Brandenburg Gate, as you know, is a major symbol for the East and West German division in Berlin. So the structure itself is very old and will be restored. The next picture I would like to show you is a picture of a lovely East German woman that we met in a restaurant. She invited us back the next day, and this day here is Thanksgiving Day. We are visiting with her. She took us to a resort on the lake. in East Berlin. Her name is Ingeborg Ruckert, a very gentle woman, but as we talked, I realized that the freedom she is about to experience will be very, very new for her. She's a timid kind of person, and it will be interesting for her.
So this particular photo was taken in East Germany, so you went across the border. And
yes.
That was an exciting experience. The rules had changed already very much, had they not?
Actually, no. Even though East and West Germany have incorporated some new travel, lessen the restrictions, the rules stay pretty much the same for the Americans. I think for our own safety, they ask us to walk through on the east side at Checkpoint Charlie. Even though there are 20 holes punched in through the wall, we, as Americans, we are to go through that Checkpoint Charlie area. So they know where we are and when we will be returning. So. This next picture is one of my favorite pictures. It is, again, the symbol of the Brandenburg Gate, and it was taken at twilight. It was a very cold day, and the sun was coming down. It was 20 degrees with a wind chill factor of probably 20 below. It was very, very cold. But even though the weather was so uncomfortable, we were, along with other people, feeling the joy and the excitement of the potential freedom. The next picture is of myself and Michael von Tolf of the Red Cross. And he is a person who is operating a Red Cross welcome center for the East German refugees that are coming into Nuremberg. Since the wall was torn down and the travel restrictions lessened, Michael von Tolf has received, at least that weekend, at least 70,000 visitors into the center. And part of a picture I think that you saw was the bank with the welcome money. East German refugees are given, visitors are given instructions on how to get the money, and the West German government gives them 100 marks of complimentary money. They call it welcome money.
And any East German can qualify for that if they come across?
Right. They are allowed to receive the money once a year. Mm-hmm. So that can come to a lot of money because there's a lot of people that are traveling back and forth. Right. And boy, they want the money.
Yes, yes.
Now this next picture should be the Berlin Wall with a background of East Germany in a large building.
Yes,
That building is designed by Albert Speer, but as you can see with the building, there is an arch. The floors are sagging and the roof is moving upwards, and the buildings have not been maintained. They're very dirty and they're run down. So I think East Germany will be working on cleaning up those and preserving those buildings.
Is there any other photos?
There is one more photo,
sure.
And this is the last one. This is not in East Germany. This is in West Germany, and this is a picture of me walking in the snow at Dachau concentration camp. Dachau is 15 miles north of Munich, and at that place, 200,000 Jews were killed. And that was a very special visit for us. Very serious place, and mostly foreign tourists there. A lot of American Jewish people were there visiting as well. So it's a very cold, chilly place, but I think it's important that these places are kept open. There is a very beautiful museum, and it certainly was a very important part of our visit.
It's so tragic to know that ever happened in history and that so many people lost their life over hate. But by preserving those kind of places, it reminds people it happened and what we need to do to not let it ever happen again. I know we have those revisionists in history who claim it did not happen, and so I'm sure after you were being there it was very emotional and reminded you of the dangers of hate and a dictatorial society where prejudice can creep in.
Mm-hmm. And the kind of background that we do need. We need to study that whole era in the early 30s on into the 40s and really be familiar with how a whole nation could have been swept away in that kind of activity. It was very tragic, and I do believe it happened.
Janelle Burke.
I know that you've been interested in education for a long time. Can you tell us what some of your suggestions are to help young people to become better acquainted with a wide variety of other persons, so that in their reading and their studying, what kinds of things can they do to become better citizens?
Well, that's a very broad question, but I think that children possess a gift that is so natural, and that's the gift of curiosity. I think it's okay for young children to ask older people questions. I know that some people, when they see me, young children, have never seen an American Indian, so if they ask me something, I'm just delighted to spend some time talking. I really do think that our public school system needs to start looking at incorporating guest speakers into the classroom, people who are different, and I believe that we're just like a patchwork quilt, and each one of us represents a different kind of fabric. And it's the total picture that makes it a beautiful, beautiful quilt. So I think that teachers work very hard at producing an experience for a young child, but oftentimes children want to have that extra dimension. There are some very good books out there for young children to read, but I know that they want to meet. They want to meet and have social interaction.
So you favor actually having some kind of a personal interchange, as opposed to just reading about things from books and that sort of thing.
Certainly, certainly.
What other kinds of activities would you suggest or recommend so that children can become more familiar, maybe with the economic realities of race in America?
I would recommend that students have the opportunity to get out and visit communities. For instance, the Coeur d'Alene tribe is only 40 miles south of Coeur d'Alene. It would be very appropriate to invite fourth graders down for an afternoon to visit with the Coeur d'Alene tribe and make some friends there. Now, the Coeur d'Alene tribe also comes up to usually Dalton Elementary at Thanksgiving time, and then an exchange. But I really think that if we're going to make this a better world, it's going to be done on a people-to-people kind of basis. It's going to be one person at a time. And those are the kinds of things that I think children relate to very well.
How about for those of us who are older? What kinds of activities go on in our communities that you can think of that you might suggest, perhaps during the summer? I know there's the annual pilgrimage, perhaps, that people might want to participate in. And that takes place on a certain Sunday in July, doesn't it?
I'd like for you and your viewers to mark August 12th. August 12th. Okay. In your calendar this year, it is a major centennial event, and we will be having the Cataldo pilgrimage take place on that day. And all the dignitaries of the state, the bishop of the state, the Coeur d'Alene Tribal Council will be there. So it will be a very exciting day, plus a lot of cultural events. So it's something that every single person can participate in. Bring your chair, bring a blanket, and just plan to just spend the day at beautiful Cataldo.
I want to get back to your keynote address that you gave, and it was an eloquent address. And you've spent some time talking about the civil rights movement and the accomplishments that Dr. King had worked so much for, such as voting rights, the integration of facilities. But you really emphasized something that he was emphasizing near the end of his life, and you referred to it earlier today, and that is the economic issue. But I know that you were addressing some specifics that relate to North Idaho. Could you give us a little more of that speech to this viewing audience about some of the statistical information that shows a problem, and how can we deal with that?
Some of our basic institutions need to begin responding to probably a very whimpering kind of cry out there. And the cry is of course in the healthcare area. We have, at least in this country, I know for sure, nearly 30 million people going without health insurance. We have the high cost of prescription drugs, people doing without any kind of healthcare services simply because they cannot afford it, or people who are just a major accident or a catastrophe away from bankruptcy if they happen to have a major illness. Some other things that are of course disturbing is that in the 5 northern counties, in the Panhandle, the latest Department of Employment statistics do show that we have nearly 4,000 people who are out of work, and 4,000 people who are not enjoying in this economic rebound. So as you can personalize this means probably cutting back on the heat, probably cutting back on the food budget. And these are people who want to work. You know them and I know them. So we need to make sure that the opportunity is there for everybody, and with that, stronger families and the ability to stay healthy. In this day and age, in this country, we really ought to be able to have people who are not afraid of getting sick. So that was the gist of my speech.
One other issue that came up during the speech, I was also impressed with the speech by the winning essay from the Coeur d'Alene High School. And in her speech, she indicated that because some people hold prejudice and bigotry as something they believe in strongly, and therefore they exclude from their life entire groups of people, that oftentimes they really cheat themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They are not a whole person in experience. Would you comment on her speech in which she emphasized the loss for those who are prejudiced but not meeting people of diversity?
Mm-hmm. I thought that was a very wise choice of words and concepts coming out of a very young person. I feel that all of us enrich each other by knowing someone, for instance, who is a woman attorney. That enriches my life. Knowing someone who is a compassionate professor, or knowing a friendly student, enriches all of our lives. I hope that as I interact with people and other Indians interact with people, that we enrich each other's lives. It's a reciprocal kind of thing. Getting to know minority people makes life more fun. Generally, the Coeur d'Alene tribe, Indian people, are fun-loving people and like to have a good time, but also take friendships very seriously and relationships as meaningful relationships. So I think that if there is an attempt to exclude, I think that's unfortunate for the society as a whole. And the more that we're included and the more that everyone is included, we can lead richer lives.
We've not made this comment on television, and this program goes into Canada, so everyone doesn't know Eugenia as well as they do in this area. And I should point out to the viewers that you are a member of the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and we are so very, very proud of all the work that you do for all of us in the public policy and other areas. But the Coeur d'Alene tribe is doing many, many very important things and very special to this area of the state of Idaho and this region of the Northwest. And we thank you personally for all you're doing. I wish we could continue on this interview, but I have the signal that time is up. Again, we want to thank you for being the keynote speaker at the 1990 Martin Luther King Day in Northern Idaho, and all the wisdom that you shared with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our guest has been Jeannie Givens, who is a former member of the Idaho State Legislature, and as I indicated, she was a keynote speaker for Dr. Martin Luther King Day, and we have been discussing that issue and some other very important public policy issues. We hope you've enjoyed our program. We're sure that you have. And I'd like to take this time to invite you to be with us again next week at this very same time, when we will discuss what we believe to be an important issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.